After a 5-month hiatus, talks between world powers have begun once again to try and salvage the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, talks will resume, but apparently expectations are quite low.
Yeah, expectations are low because the optics are not good. We're going back to the negotiating table with an unwilling partner. Things are different from 2015. The Iranian regime is not backing down. They have obviously a much more hardline president in office, Raisi. They are cracking down on protesters. They are doubling down on their desire to enrich uranium at a 60% or higher standard. And they have not stopped any of their nefarious activities, whether it's in maritime activities or it's in drones or in supporting Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis in Yemen. They have their hands in terrorism throughout the region, and we look and connect the dots, whether it's in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon and Gaza and everywhere else. So it doesn't look good. The only thing that is the same as 2015 is the desire by the administration here in the United States to get back into a deal. So you have a Biden administration that is pining for a deal, regardless of what the optics look like, regardless of how the Iranian regime is behaving. They want to remove those sanctions. They want to remove all the penalties. They want to get the money back to the Iranian regime and play this game of appeasement. But again, the Iranian regime is making it very difficult for them and making it seem as though this is not going to go through because they're coming out with daily threats, chest thumping, and making it known that they're not going to have any sort of behavioral changes or whatsoever or changes in their weapons program. So it's going to be an uphill battle. But again, when you have Washington really, really going for it, it's going to be difficult to not get a deal.
Meanwhile, let's talk a bit about Israel. That country is developing its ability to conduct a military strike against Iran's nuclear program should circumstances demand it. Lisa, it held large-scale exercises in the north this month and plans to hold 30% more drills next year compared to this year.
Right. It's important to segue from the story about Iran nuclear talks to what is Israel's reaction. On the eve of getting back into these nuclear talks, you have the general of the IRGC in Iran, again, doubling down on its threat to take Israel off the map, to end Zionism and to annihilate Israel. Those are exact phrases taken from his statement. So obviously, Israel has to do its own work behind the scenes because while the United States and Israel will always be allied, right now it looks like the United States has been a bit estranged from its partner Israel in the region. If you're going back with such a rush and hurry to the negotiating table with the enemy of your ally, it's not a good look, particularly as the Iranian regime makes more threats against Israel. So what has Israel done? They are partnering up with Arab states in the region to have a coalition to fight the Iranian regime should this go any further, should the Iranian regime have weapons and the capability to strike Israel. Remember, the Iranian regime has always referred to Israel as the small Satan and the United States as the big Satan. So the small Satan is within their reach. So if they should want to attack, they will attack Israel. And of course, they've made no qualms, or they're not hiding that agenda, right? So right now we have, Israel preparing and coming up with what they call a plan B, should this deal go through and should Iran again act on its threats against Israel.
Let's circle back to the threat for just a moment here, Lisa. A spokesperson for the Islamic Republic of Iran's armed forces urged the total elimination of the Jewish state during a recent interview. Now, this general has said they will not back off from the annihilation of Israel. So what has Israel's response been recently? And how about the Biden administration? You said that Israel and the U.S. will always be allies.
Yeah, it doesn't look good, right, Hal? And I think that's this rift that has been created, even if it's at the podium only, even if it's by words only, it's quite significant. Look, Israel is the size of the state of New Jersey. That's always been said. And they are our ally in the region. We give them aid. They give us a lot of intel. They give us help with so many technological advances here, whether it's in hospitals, whether it's an app on your phone, so many technological advances in the military world. The Iron Dome is coming perhaps to the Western world again. So, it's the fact that this looks very bad when the Iranian regime continues to threaten Israel, and we are gunning for this deal and going fast forward into a deal with the enemy, a sworn enemy, when on the eve, even that's the main point here, Hal, is that they're not even trying to be on their best behavior in order to get a deal. That's how badly they believe the Biden administration wants this deal. So the Iranian regime has continued with its support of terrorism. They've continued with their bad behavior. They've continued with not allowing transparency with their nuclear program. They're not letting the IAEA have the amount of surveillance that they want, that is standard for this kind of deal. All they want is the money. They want the sanctions removed, and they want to do whatever they want to grow their empire. This is the original Islamic State, is the Shiite Islamic State of the Iranian regime, which they have been trying to build since 1979 with the toppling of the Shah and the creation of this Islamic State. That there's no other way to put it, that they have tried to push their Shiite agenda in the region. And let me tell you, the Obama administration helped them, and now the Biden administration, although the optics don't look as good as they did back then, they're trying to help them as well. And when the Iranian regime comes to the table knowing that they have the upper hand because they believe that the Biden administration wants this deal so badly, that's not a good place to start for negotiations whatsoever.
Lisa, high inflation has been a huge topic of discussion across North America. Here in Canada, we're dealing with inflation over 4%. I know it's also a big issue for you in the United States. As we've seen groceries go through the roof, the cost of groceries and rent has gone up quite a bit. It appears as though the Biden administration is blaming inflation on the COVID-19 pandemic.
They blame everything on the COVID pandemic. This is an easy way to push change through society and have people accept that change because of a pandemic. The pandemic has induced fear, and fear makes people less likely to complain about different changes, about wearing masks, about their children wearing masks in school, about the price of gasoline. We're almost at $6 a gallon here in Southern California, wow. Probably the most expensive in the nation. The price of food. Right now, we had Thanksgiving here in the States, where we're coming up on Christmas and New Year's. It's a time where people have family gatherings, and they want to make it special. They want to buy gifts for their children. They want to have dinners, and things are, people are noticing, right? When you go to the store, you're paying much more for basic things, let alone gifts and other luxury items. So with that, again, when they blame it on the pandemic, people have to throw their hands up and say, it is what it is. We're all going through the same thing. It's a global pandemic, so everyone's going through it. They're not looking at the legislation. They're not looking at the policies. They're not looking at the ideology of the current administration that is leading the country in a certain way, that is causing the inflation, that has, all of these goods lined up at our ports, unable to kind of meet the supply and demand. And because of that, experts are saying the demand will go down because the supply is not coming through. This is horrible for our economy, obviously. This is horrible for the global economy. And again, they'll continue to blame it on the pandemic. And now we have a variant. So again, people are scared, and they have to sit back and not complain about any of these changes.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about that. The first North American Omicron cases have been identified here in Canada, 2 cases in our nation's capital in Ottawa. What's it been like so far in the United States? Any reports of the new cases of the new COVID-19 variant?
Yeah, great question, right? Everyone's waiting. We just had a press conference with the president to talk about this variant. And it seems like the only thing this variant has brought, particularly to the United States, is fear, more fear. And more fear of saying there might be a shutdown. People whose businesses are just trying to get back off the ground from being shut down, restaurants and other places of business, nail salons and gyms and other things. They are in fear. They're living in fear that tomorrow we'll have another shutdown, and the next day and the next day. We also have a governor here in California, for example. I bring up California not only because I live here, but it's really a microcosm of what's going on in this country, where the governor puts back in a state of emergency, which we have had for almost 2 years, and he goes off to Mexico with his family. There's a lot of hypocrisy. A lot of people are starting to notice, which is a good thing. But on the flip side, no one's going to complain because these are state mandated or trying to make them federal mandated in some cases. Thankfully, those mandates are being overturned one by one. But why do we have to take them to court to say that this is not freedom? This is not the way people want to live. So this new variant, some people are saying it's more transmissible, and some are saying that is not the case. That has not been proven. What I do want to point out is that I did read this morning that the original cases in Africa were individuals who were vaccinated. So when they try to push this agenda of you have to get vaccinated, you have to get vaccinated, which, it should be a personal choice. We also have to put these other facts side by side and say the people who are catching the variant are also vaccinated. So, it's very circular in its reasoning. A lot of people are asking questions. Look, I understand this is a pandemic. We're paving our own way. Nobody really knows. A lot of this is very new, but a lot of it is blindly being pushed, and a lot of people are asking questions. And I think this new variant, it reminds us of, all the previous variants, and again, the fear that society will shut down once again, that children will not have that sense of normalcy when they go to school, and schools may be shut down, businesses may be shut down. So we shall see. We don't have cases here in the United States so far, but because it's appeared in parts of Europe, in Canada, I'm sure it's only going to be a matter of time before we see cases here in the United States as well.
A top official with the World Health Organization criticized the recent travel bans being placed on southern African nations amid concern over that COVID-19 variant Omicron. Now, the WHO's regional director for Africa, Lisa, says the travel restrictions may slightly reduce the spread, but it also places a heavy burden on people's livelihoods.
It does. And again, this has been the actual, the problem with deciding on how to go forward. They say it's for our own good to shut down society, but yet it shuts, there are other side effects. And Hal, you and I have talked about this for almost 2 years, coming up on the 2-year anniversary of this pandemic. Shutting down caused suicide and a lot of depression and drug overdose, and children who are going to forever be scarred by this, lack of interaction and, the academic setbacks and the social setbacks for children in school. So many restaurants in Los Angeles, for example, weren't able to open back up. So this example of South Africa shutting its borders and not allowing them to fly, into other countries. Yes, they say it's for their own good, but again, these are the other unintended consequences of shutting down. And I'll also bring it to your attention that we had this under President Trump, where he tried to close the borders, and it was criticized by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, who are now closing the borders. Look, it's really there's so much political play mixed into what is the best for people and for society and for our well-being. And then we talk about, the health consequences versus the other consequences, economic, psychological, and other. So, I think this debate will be ongoing, and I understand the concern of those who are in South Africa. But we shall see what happens in the weeks to come. We'll see if this variant is as dangerous as the Delta was, and what this means going forward. If we're going to have variant after variant, we're just going to have this forever. It's just going to be one, emergency after the other, using these powers to shut borders, to shut businesses, to shut schools. We shall see where it takes us.
Yeah, wave after wave after wave. It does seem to be never ending. You're right. Lisa, around 27 Russian diplomats are being kicked out of the United States. Officials say the group will be leaving on January 30th. What happened?
Yeah, look, this is heating up, right? So this is not the first group of diplomats to be expelled from the United States, but they'll be leaving on January 30th. A spokesman from their group said, we're running thin. Our staff here is very low. Didn't talk about the political consequences of this row between the United States and Russia, but it seems as though this row is heating up. And to expel these diplomats is extremely symbolic. Obviously, we're asking questions of Russia in many ways, particularly in ransomware and in hacking, and obviously in their nefarious activities in different places in the world. So there are a lot of questions, but it seems like it's like a cold rift between the two. There's no real dialogue. There's no answers that are being given. There's no transparency coming from Russia, obviously. And this is the way Putin plays his game. So the only recourse the United States has is to expel them and not allow them to have the influence and have the ability to spy and get into our infrastructures, cyber and otherwise, to get rid of the influence of the Russians on U.S. soil.
Taiwan deployed its Air Force over the weekend in an effort to drive back many Chinese aircraft that entered its air defense base. Lisa, China reportedly deployed aircraft into the area as part of gray zone warfare with the island nation?
Yep. Talking about things heating up, we're talking also about Taiwan and China. China very, very slowly and sometimes more obviously instigating with Taiwan. We know that they have talked about this for a very long time, and we've been warned by Taiwan that this has been happening. And now they're showing tangible signs of encroachment, where they're in their airspace. And Taiwan did not shy away from calling in their military over the weekend to get these planes out of their airspace. Look, it's going to be an exchange of hits back and forth, and the Chinese don't seem like they're backing down. But fortunately, the international community is stepping in to defend Taiwan against this big bully China, and we shall see where this takes us.
Absolutely. We'll keep our eye on that situation, that story as it develops. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.